Hello there. My name is BobbySapphire. Welcome to the resurrection of my acclaimed Star Wars card podcast, where I invite prominent Star Wars Unlimited card players and deck builders on to make one simple demand. Show me your deck. In today's episode, I invite on Grumpy Elephant from McClunky Gaming to talk about Anakin Datavault, the deck that he and his teammates developed and played to 3 top 8 finishes at the Beatle 2 Invitational in Atlanta a couple weeks ago. If you like this kind of Star Wars Unlimited content, please subscribe to this podcast anywhere you can get your podcast. If you want your own RSS feed, you can go over to patreon.com/KTOD, sign up as a free member, put it in any podcast app you want. I would also appreciate it if you shared this podcast with anybody you know who likes their swoo with a side of a sick brew. All right, time to talk to Grumpy. Let's hit it. All right, let's welcome in Grumpy Elephant to talk about Anakin Datavault. What's up, Grumpy?
Hey, Mike. Good to see you. Doing well, recovering from travel, and excited to chat about SWU with you.
Yeah, this is the deck that, it is everywhere right now. Like, absolutely everywhere. You made videos, like Pasquale and McClunky Gaming both made a video about this. I saw Thork made a video today. Where else are you seeing this deck pop up?
We're actually seeing it all over on. We went to SWU Stats and checked the rates of play for different top decks over the past week. Anakin Datavault is now the #1 most played deck on, which is wild to me because my previous claim to fame was a quirky deck called Quinlan ECL that I won with and then nobody played. And so to then win with a deck and have everybody start to play it and ask questions about it and make videos is a little bit of a surreal experience.
Yeah, and when this deck has become so ubiquitous in the meta, although like obviously this is a very nascent stage, the tournaments haven't even really started, the official ones. Like, how do you feel as someone who, in general, plays the same deck for like essentially a whole format? Like, you played that Quinlan ECL like all of set 2 and 3. You played
All
it
of
for a
set,
while.
set 3, all of set 4, I played it during the Django meta. I
You're
tried to play it during set 5.
You're a one trick. You take a deck and you stick with it for the most part. I don't mean that as an insult. That's just what you generally tend to do. And like you mentioned to me when we were talking before the show that like you ran this at Worlds.
Yep.
So like you stick with a deck and you stick with a card. your your
That's
baby
really
bounty
That's
hunter's
really what
quarry.
it comes down to. Bounty Hunter's Quarry, if it's not there, I'm not interested. But to answer your question, I'm a little anxious actually that folks are playing this to such a wide degree because part of the thrill of SWU for me is I like finding my own angle. I like building my own deck. I like getting hundreds of games in on practice, and I like going to tournaments, sitting down across from an opponent and knowing I've played this matchup 50 times and they've played it once or twice. And now if I bring Anakin Datavault and I sit down, I'm bringing the heavy hitter. I'm bringing the deck that they've thought about how to counter. And it'll be an interesting test for one, my own enjoyment, and two, my own skill, I think, to bring a refined meta deck to a tournament instead of my weird edge case that plays cards I like that nobody else really does.
Yeah, it's the dangers of success. You know, you try and go rogue, and then if you do well enough, people take notice, and you build something that's really great and something that can stand up to the rest of the meta. People are going to play it, and it makes attacking the meta like it's a really tough angle to find sometimes. And I think a lot of us wrestle with that question of when do you look for something that's a little off meta, and when do you play what
Mhm.
everyone's going to expect. So
Yep.
now going forward, I don't know when's your first event of the PQ season or
Yeah, to
next
be
season.
honest, I have nothing on the schedule. I have nothing on the schedule for the rest of set 6. I can't make regionals. I'm pretty sure I can't make sectors. I've moved, so I live in a small town in rural Illinois that is like multiple hours away from PQs. So I'm not sure. Part of me says maybe I'll just sit back and watch other people smash Anakin Data Vaults against each other. But if it continues to do well, I'll try and find something. I'll try and find something within a couple hours to bring it to.
Yeah, nice. Well, I think the first thing that I want to talk about is just like um, the evolution. So we mentioned that you
Yeah.
played Quinlan ECL with Bounty Hunter Quarry. You ran some version of Anakin Bounty Hunter
Yeah.
Quarry at Worlds. How did we
Yeah.
get here with Set Six and Secrets of Power and like things finding its way in? Obviously, like very obviously, Cinta a great fit, Nemec a
Yeah.
great fit, Mina Bonteri a great
Yeah.
fit. But like, how did this progression come about?
Yeah, well, FFG has only themselves to blame for this deck, and if this deck really takes off. And that's because they made a decision that made me really sad as a Quinlan player. They released a couple of articles and a video saying, we did a test game and found that if units all had more health, the games were more fun and went longer. And so we started seeing more 4 health 2 drops and more 5 health 3 drops. And that pretty much neutered my Quinlan ECL approach because that deck was also a value deck. That deck was also the closest to a unit-based control deck that I could get. I was using things like the Quinlan Ping plus Ambush Ayla Secura plus Bounty Hunter's Quarry to go wide, control the board, use a General's Blade on Quinlan to get a really beefy Voltron leader to continue to turn out value, and just get dominating control of the board such that any mid-range deck or lower could no longer get a foothold in the game. And at that point, I would turn my attention towards base and I would kill them usually over 1, 2, or 3 turns, depending on the power that I had. But then FFG said, we really don't like Grumpy Elephant. We don't like how well he's been doing with Quinlan. Let's give everything more health so that the Quinlan ping now is really only good with Tarkentown, right? And we still saw Quinlan Tarkentown doing quite well. But Grumpy's build is going to sort of wither and die on the vine. And so I had to go back to the drawing board. This was set 5. This was looking ahead towards Worlds. And I just like the playstyle. My brain works really well with the puzzle that is, how can I wrestle control of the board away from my opponents? How can I solve the puzzle that every turn presents to get a little bit of incremental advantage such that by the time we reach the leader flip turns and later, it's too late for them. Even late game bombs like Luke Skywalker or Crate Dragon aren't going to be enough to turn the tides. And I switched then with that thought in mind from Quinlan to Anakin, because the difference between Quinlan and Anakin in my mind is that Quinlan does math at a +1,
Mm-hmm.
but Anakin does math at a +2. So when the health goes +1 across all units, the Quinlan +1 isn't enough, but the Anakin +2 becomes perfect. And so the play patterns that I started trying out for Worlds were just, how do 2 drops pair off? And if I can open a Gungi 2 power, I can take out any 4 health opposing 2 drop and survive. I can take out any 3/3 and survive. The force meta meant that a lot of folks were playing shielded 2 drops, things like Secretive Sage. And I found very quickly, if I have initiative and I open Sabine,
Yeah.
I can both kill pretty much any 2 drop, use the ping and then the 2 damage. And then if the Sabine survives, I can sometimes just claim and also kill their 3 drop. I can use Anakin's ability, and Sabine is now hitting up for a potential 5. And so just this micro interaction at the start of the game was able to give Anakin a real edge in just early board math. The thing that threw a wrench in all of that essentially was force throw. The number of times that I flipped my Anakin at Worlds to be hit with a self force throw for 7 or 8 or 9 and just immediately delete the leader effectively undid all of that careful board math I had been doing up to that point, and meant the games generally went really grindy and I didn't have a strong leader to help me close. And so it was about probably 2 things contributed to Anakin Datavault not breaking through in set 5. One was Force Throw, just the ability to defeat Anakin for 1. And then the other was the cards in the deck were good, but they weren't amazing. I was playing things like Adigalia, I was playing things like Gungi, I was playing strong 2 drops, but that were on parity with the 2 drops that other decks were playing. And so I had this deck in the back of my mind as they started spoilers for set 6. And the first card that really made me think there might be something here was Nemec. Nemec, stat line that historically I've not liked in 2 drops, 3/2. Of course, the ability to make a spy is something that everyone is now familiar with. And the first thing I realized was, if I play a Nemec either early or later in the game, I can either trade with their 2 drop and have something on the board still, or I can take out a Luke Skywalker with a Nemec alone. The
Yeah.
ability of Anakin plus Nemec to deal 7 damage, 5 from the Nemec, 2 from the Spy, made me think this has turbocharged a deck that I've already spent months working on. And then Queen Amidala came out, and she put 9 power on the board for 5, the ability to hold 7 health leaders hostage with a 5 drop and not die back. That was reminiscent to me of Ayla Sakura. I loved ECLing in Ayla, 6 power ping from Quinlan just to take out a Django on the spot. And now I had a 5 drop that didn't necessarily rely on ECL, but that also put 3 bodies. So it was a combination of this is a style that I liked, plus I think the most powerful cards from set 6 happened to fit into the color pairing that I was already working with, meant I was committed to making this deck work, and so I was off to the races.
Yeah, those are two absolutely just insane additions. I mean, you didn't even mention Nemec has hidden too. So like when these
Mm-hmm.
things are coming, like you could just drop him and he can
Yep.
hostage quite a bit.
Yep.
With like keeping in mind that you have a 6 cost leader and you have these units that are able to hold that are able to trade up in such a profound way that they can, like you said, hold leaders hostage like an Amidala. Why the decision to not play something like Resupply, Spark of Hope, or
Mm.
anything that's like more aggressive ramp, so that you can
Yeah.
you can have an Amidala hit the table before like a Quinlan flips or a Han flips or a Luke
Sure.
flips.
Yeah, so the main reason is going to be less, I think, to do with is Queen Amidala powerful a turn early, and more to do with the Anakin leader itself. The earlier Anakin flips, the fewer turns we have access to his leader side ability. And this deck is built around his leader side ability, not necessarily around his unit ability. The unit is an incredibly powerful finisher. A lot of decks just fold to it if you can get a General's Blade. But I wanted to use his leader ability the maximum number of times per game. I use his leader ability when there's nothing on the board. If I'm against a control deck and they've already claimed initiative, I will self ping for 2 just to get the damage on my own base up there every time I can. I played a mirror match against Pasquale in Seattle. I self pinged for 2 every turn. He didn't. By the time we got to our Anakin flips, my Anakin had 7 power and his had 4. So whether you're using the Anakin ability to trade or whether you're using the Anakin ability to just put damage on your own base to make a more powerful leader, I want to be doing that as many times per game as I can. And resupply not only reduces the number of times you can self ping or trade up, but it also means you're flipping earlier, which means Anakin is likely going to be weaker. Flipping a 4/7 leader at a time when you've been sort of jostling for board control, you've skipped a unit, not particularly impactful. Potentially made up for by the ability to get a Queen Amidala out on the opponent's 4 resource turn, but I found that with the strength of the 2 drops and 3 drops, in particular Nemec and Cobb, I was having pseudo Queen Amidalas anyway. The
Mm-hmm.
units that I was playing were already generating more units, and so I wasn't in any particular rush to get to 6. I was in a rush to get board control. And for me, the only ramp then that I needed was
The blade.
Shamsandula.
Oh, or
I
yeah,
wanted, well, the blade also. The
yeah.
blade also is great to cheat out, but I rarely put a blade on things like Gunji or Huyang. I tend to save my blades for Voltron if I can, if I know what my opponent is playing. But what I was finding, particularly against, for example, Blue Green Villain, they love to ramp. They love to resupply. Sometimes I would just follow that up with a Cham on my 4 to sort of keep parity. Sometimes I would wait and Cham on 5 to then surprise flip Anakin.
Right.
But I found that the extra value in catching up in terms of ramp was significantly higher than the value I got from proactively ramping myself.
Yeah, and Cham's great because he also can pin leaders. I mean, just as well as Amidala.
Yep.
He's even got more health, in the one unit. But being able to just slam a Cham, even when you just know that a 7 health leader is coming, can just be the difference. And when you have things like Red 5, Open Fire, other ways to chip damage. You
Yep.
get a lot of value in things like Cobb Vanth dying, Karis Nemec dying. So like speaking of Voltron, you kind of have these ways to cobble together kills on otherwise problematic units. It doesn't seem like there are too many units that you could face on the other side of the table that you couldn't take out.
Yeah. And that's actually, I'm glad you mentioned it. That's one reason why I really like Red 5. We originally had 3 Red 5s in largely for the Han 2 matchup, which we thought was going to be a little bit more prominent at Seattle than it actually was. The ability to just have a Red 5 and really punish Han using his own leader ability aggressively, we found to be really effective. But the way we found that folks can counter Anakin is trying to get ahead on board trades, particularly in the mirror match, trying to, trade up before you can, which means people who are countering Anakin are leaving themselves with a lot of very weak units on the board. A lot of their units just end up having 1 or 2 health. And so having red 5 either played dry from hand, or my preference is it's actually one of the best bounty hunters quarry finds you can get, because the units are training, they're going to end up with a bunch of damage units, and then surprise, you thought I had no resources left, now I have a red 5 that's going to threaten to finish off all of those leaders, the ability, or all of those units, and the ability to finish off a leader also, to sort of deal damage with a unit and then use that too to finish off a leader. It just added so much flexibility, and it gave us an edge in cases where the game did devolve into trading and trades that we were losing. Red 5 has the ability to essentially make up for lost trades and then end up ahead on board after all.
And one of the few things out there that can take out an opposing Falcon, an opposing AT stolen AT hauler, which can, for a lot of decks, is really tough. And of course, it would only trade with the AT hauler, but like sometimes that's all you need. That if that AT hauler gets out of hand, it's not dying to do anything. So you don't have a ton of space here, but you do have like Jedi Starfighter, which is just an all-star against Vader, and it can also trade up into a Falcon and not die back, which is great. Blue Leader, which we put him in space when it's really advantageous, but otherwise probably most of the time becoming a 5/5 if we can help it. And then the red 5, and then way later in the game you've got a couple home ones. So when you're brawling on the ground with a deck like Anakin, and I think like the ground brawl is really important right now, pretty much all across the meta, but there are plenty of space decks. So how did you decide like how much space to put in here and how much to deviate away from the ground brawl?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I'll start just by talking about Jedi Starfighter. Jedi Starfighter made an appearance in my Galactics deck, but it was in my sideboard because I said what I'm trying to do here at Galactics is just win that ground brawl, get ahead on ground, and then win the race that way. And then one of my only 2 losses, day 2, was to a Kazuda. I was able to beat I beat a Kazuda red during Swiss, and then I lost to a Kazuda blue. And the reason I lost to a Kazuda blue is I had nothing to answer the speed in the air game 1, and then game 2, I did not see a Jedi Starfighter. When I played the Kazuda Red, I similarly lost game 1 because I had next to no space in my main board. And then games 2 and 3, I started with a Jedi Starfighter. The first time I played it, game 2, I had initiative. My opponent had to go, "What is that card?" He read it. He said, "Hold on a second." He read my Anakin leader ability. He read the Jedi Starfighter again, and he frowned.
Yeah.
He was really upset because he could play nothing that would survive or even trade with the Jedi Starfighter. And so I left Galactic saying, this card is incredible against space. If you're facing a space deck, it is the single best card in the deck. If you're not facing a space deck, it is the single worst card in the deck. And I decided, right, there was a lot of buzz pre-Beatle about pilot decks are going to be really big. So I said, let's just throw 3 of those in the main, right? If I need to, I can mulligan for them, but I want them to start, and then I can side them out every game if necessary. And in most matchups, the 3 Jedi Starfighters were my first side out. The question then became, okay, I have this incredible anti-space start. How much more space do I need? And what am I trying to do with that additional space? You'll note I don't have Bright Hopes in either the main or currently in the side. I think I dabbled with them in, might have been the Invitational in Seattle, but the principle that I should have stuck with and that I've gone back to is if I'm going to have another space unit, I want it to have impact in the ground battle as well. So red 5 can throw that 2 damage on the ground. Blue Leader, as you've mentioned, can ambush a space unit, but very often ends up on the ground anyway with 2 experience. And the balance that we ended up honing during practice was, unlike ground matchups, I don't need full board control. I don't need to stop everything that they play over the course of the game. I just need to stop generally their first 2 turns. If I can stop their first couple of plays, whether it's an early Falcon, whether it's 2 1-drops that I can clean up with the Jedi Starfighter, if I can make the damage race start later, I can win. And so my approach to space is not stop the space rush. My approach to space is stall the space rush. Can I use a Jedi Starfighter? Can I use a blue leader to ambush something like a 2/3 Cartel Turncoat, draw a card, or 2/3 Sanctioner Shuttle, free one of my captured units, right? Just slow the game down enough so that by the time we get to leader flips, sure, they'll throw a leader onto their ship and make a huge threat. I'll play Outer Rim Constables and return it to a normal size. And then I'll flip my 6, 7, 8 power leader, 9, 10, 11 with the General's Blade. And I'll usually end the game between 25 and 30 HP. That's where the Datavault buffer has really shined in Space Race decks.
Yeah.
But the key calibration, and that I would encourage folks practicing at home to try, is you're not trying to stop everything. The damage is going to get through. Your base is going to get dangerously high. It's how much do you need to stop so that you can then comfortably win the game on the ground.
Yeah, and Anakin is like puts into play something that I've seen in a lot of other card games, but not so much Star Wars Unlimited, which is like using your life as a resource. And
Yep.
he's the one guy that lets
Yeah.
you like really take advantage of that, which is great. So you mentioned practice, and
Yep.
when thinking about like how to sort of like implement this deck going forward,
Yep.
another thing that you mentioned in your video with McClunky Gaming, which if people haven't checked out, it'll be linked in the show notes in the YouTube description, so please check that out. You mentioned the different play styles of you and Tyler and Pasquale, and you
Yep.
likened your your style of play to a boa constrictor that slowly squeezes
Did.
the life out of like a board state or something. Um, that's certainly one way to play Star Wars Unlimited, but like how like how can you like what do you have to say about that in terms of like how can we get better with this deck, because
Yeah.
there are two ways to play. Like you can get really aggressive with it, you can just soak the
Yep.
damage and go for it, but with
Yep.
the trading, like how do you know, I guess, when to move from the boa constrictor strategy to like an attack face strategy? You mentioned earlier that it was like when the board's clear, but like that can't
Yep.
always be right. So like how do we navigate that?
It's a great question. And I'll say up front, like, I am a terrible Sabine player. If I have the choice between putting damage on a base and killing a unit, I always want to kill a unit. And for some reason, I just get immense satisfaction in killing everything my opponent can do. My very first PQ, actually, I played Boss Blue. I was a hard control player. I played Palp Yellow through set one, and then I played Boss Blue. I just like the feeling of, I guess, making my opponents not enjoy playing the game, and I apologize for that. I do think with Anakin it's a little better because I'm at least playing units, so I'm giving them the chance to interact. But what I would say to sort of practice that mentality, right? If you're an aggro player and you want to play Anakin a more aggro style, this is how Pasquale really shined. Two thumbs up, go for it. If you want to practice my so-called boa constrictor style, I would recommend get games against your friends, and do not try to win the game. Your goal when you play is not to win the game, because winning the game happens when you get either 25 or 30 or 33 or however many damage on base that your opponent's max base health is. Your goal during practice games should just be to clear the board. You can set a goal for yourself. If I can keep your board clear through the 8 resource, 9 resource, 10 resource turn, I win anyway. We can stop and restart. Do that mechanism over and over again, because the value that gets maximized there is not the classic mid-range value of control the board enough to go face, right? The sort of mid-range tension of at some point I have to turn to the base. The value that gets maximized there is how can I make every trade to my advantage? How can I squeeze every last drop of value out of the cards that I play? And so sometimes it means attacking with your 2-drop first into their 2-drop, and then getting something like a spy or leaving a damage 2-drop. Sometimes it means playing your 3-drop before you attack. One way to break the mirror is whoever attacks first can end up on the back foot, because if the other person spends resources and doesn't attack, now the initiative has flipped. Now you have initiative and you're setting the tempo for the rest of the mirror. And so at every turn, the question is not how am I going to win the game by getting damage on base? The question is, how am I going to keep my opponent's board maximally clear while leaving the maximum amount of value on my own side? And with that balance, then you will start to find the equilibrium point. For every matchup, you will start to find how much board presence do I need before it's safe to go base and know that I can clean up whatever my opponent plays with what I have left. So one rule of thumb that I often go by is like if I've played a Queen Amidala and then I'm able to keep my opponent's board clear, I will start going base because I can hold back a 5-power unit made 7 by Anakin to take out a Caloran Beck, an Enfys Nest, sort of whatever my opponent's going to play, and I can safely spend the rest of my units attacking base. But in my mind, I'm not throwing damage to base because I'm thinking, I need to win now. I need to get damage on base. I'm throwing damage on my opponent's base because I'm thinking, no matter what they play, I will still be able to take care of it. I'm holding enough in reserve to both put damage to base now and clear the board. And so you said at some point, surely that has to stop. It has to stop when you win the game, right? In many matchups, I will do this until the game is over. In some matchups, in particular aggro matchups, when you're facing a Sabine, like she has so much reach, she can often get there, and so you have to turn a little bit earlier. But the challenge in every matchup is knowing what that equilibrium point is, and the way to identify that equilibrium point is to get practice controlling the board as long as possible. If you are talented enough to control the board as long as possible, you will get to decide when to change the rhythm of the game. If you're not as talented or you don't have enough practice, your opponent will be the one to decide when the rhythm changes because they may break through the wall that you're presenting. So for me, it's really about every game has a rhythm. I sort of tap into it, and then I want to make sure I'm the one who decides when that rhythm changes.
So I hate to break this to you, but you sound like a very excellent Sabine player because those are the breakpoints that Sabine mirrors go through. Of you don't attack base early in a Sabine mirror. You take control of the board and you make sure that you hold something up to kill whatever they can play. I think for me that there is an element of like, okay, especially like coming off of playing a lot of Palpatine, attacking with the thing that can do the most board clearing last, like holding my Vader, holding my Palp, is a
Yep.
skill that I had to develop over like getting cleared out by or like getting shock killed by Cassians and stuff. So I
Mhm.
think like that's really important. The progression that I try and go to, because I think that when I play, if I try and control the board only for too long, it becomes detrimental. It's how I felt I lost a lot of games with
Mhm.
Quinlan when I was playing Quinlan
Mhm.
Tarkentown in set 3 meta. Um, because I would think that I could clear forever, and then I would never have enough push to actually end
Yeah.
the game. Anakin obviously offers something a little bit different because the longer the game goes, he can have more power and whatnot. But I try and think of every turn and go through what I call in my head the systems phase, where I say like, okay, how much damage can my opponent do to me this turn? Worst case scenario, and what's the most damage
Yep.
I can do to my opponent? Best case scenario. And if I can win the game, or they can't beat me that turn, and I can win the game next turn, then I will. That's
Yep.
generally when I flip. Because if I'm playing a 33 health base and I'm at like 5, I certainly don't care if my opponent plays like a wrecker or a Poe. You know, if I'm getting like 15 damage in and he's got 23 to go.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I want to be clear, when I'm in tournament play, right, I'm not making the game
Sure.
go to 10, 11, 12 resources. Like I have changed the rhythm. I have identified the
Yeah.
point at which it's technical base, and in some matches like Sabine, it's much earlier. In some matches like I don't know, the Anakin mirror, it can be later. The thing that I want to emphasize in what I'm saying is if you are trying to get better at the deck,
Right.
practice waiting on that switch until later because the more experience you have, the board math gets more complicated as the game goes on. So that's where the really nuanced puzzles are. The really nuanced puzzles of which unit do I want to put the +2 on? Which unit do I want to attack first? Which unit do I want to attack into? So the more experience you can get with those later, more complicated turns, the better I think you'll get at those earlier turns. One, so you'll be in a better position later, the more practice you have. And then two, the more autonomy you'll have in deciding when to switch rhythms. Like,
Yeah.
yes, Mike, you're right. You're going to have to switch rhythms at some point. But I'm just encouraging people to practice sort of the level, like the foundational skill that
Well, it's
enables
an
the
important
switcher.
part of practice, and like a lot of people think that they're practicing because they are like jamming games or whatever over and over. But I find that a lot of times when I'm trying to look for games with meaningful opponents, like set up, hey, do you want to play? People don't want to
Yep.
play as much because they just want to go win. But the thing
Yep.
that you've outlined here and like encourage people to do, which I think is really really important, and I think something that people all know deep down is that like you can't be results oriented with your practice. Like
Yep.
you can be results oriented when you
Yep.
go and play in a tournament, you want to win. But if you're doing the most preparation, then yeah, I think Grumpy, you have like excellent points about just keep you've never been in a situation where you had to Keller in for a typho and know that you also had to like save a Hu Yang so you could get to the extra +2 or whatever it is, or maybe you had to Keller in for Hu Yang. But like whatever the dynamic is, the longer you go and the more opportunities you have to play, the
Yep.
more situations you're going to come into.
Yep.
I lost a
Yeah.
game playing it was yesterday this morning that I was like, oh man, I've never been in this situation before. I
Mm.
definitely could have seen this. I
Yep.
needed to attack and pop the shield last turn so that I could kill the thing
Yep.
this turn. Things like that. You only
Yeah.
get through practice and only get through meaningful and thoughtful practice. So I think
Yeah.
that's great for
Yeah.
everyone.
You said something in a video a while back that I really, really liked, and the framing has stuck with me. I think it was talking about the new set is coming out and you're trying to figure out what to play. And you said, in every game I play, I'm doing one of two things. I'm either winning or I'm learning. And I think that was such a good mentality. And I was with you in practice, I would much rather learn. I enjoy losing in practice to lines I haven't seen before, to cards I'm not familiar with, because then I can add that to my mental repository of matchups, of lines, of plays. And so then when I sit down and I'm locked in for tournament mode, I am much less likely to lose, and then I can win. I want to learn during practice and I want to win during tournaments. I think if you win during practice, you're more likely to have to learn during tournaments, and then you go home not having made top cut.
Well, in the Star Wars universe, the word Carabast is a swear, and so I'll never admit to having said that word. And in fact,
Right.
if ever knowing that in Star Wars it's a curse word, people will understand
Yeah.
why there are so many bleeps in this video at this point.
Okay.
Because I'm writing down every time you swear, Grumpy. Um,
I apologize.
it's
That is on
okay.
me.
We have no one on this call to blame. Uh, all right. We've talked a lot about the main deck. We've talked about the strategy. Anakin is obviously a leader, like a lot of the leaders we play in tournaments that has been around a long time. Is there
Yeah.
anything else you want to cover about the main deck before we talk about the sideboard?
I wanted to shout out one particular card that is what turned this deck from good to great for me and made me fully lock in for Beatle on this deck. It is not Bounty Hunter's Quarry, but it is a card that made me that I put in the deck because of Bounty Hunter's Quarry. I was learning in practice, and I popped a Bounty Hunter's Quarry, and I looked at my options, and I had some powerful 3 drops. I could have gotten a red 5. I think I could have gotten a Gungan Warrior, and I think I had flipped the rhythm, so I was trying to push damage to base. And I chose, instead of those 3 drops, I chose a Nemec. I used my Bounty Hunter's Quarry and I intentionally got less than max value by pulling a Nemec. And the second I did that, I said, wow, I really want as many Nemeks as I can. I want Nemec to be on the board every time it's possible. You know what card can get Nemec? Cobb Vanth.
Yeah.
And so that was when I added 3 Cobb Vanths to the deck. And I started just getting that much more consistent because I had another sort of nesting doll strategy of units creating units. I was more resilient to things like blue green villain. I could refill the board after blasts or board clears more easily. And effectively, the number of Nemeks that I was running in the deck had doubled. It wasn't just playing them dry. Sometimes I'd still get them off of Bounty Hunter's Quarry, but searching 10 cards off of Cobb Vanth for then what is, I think, and arguably the best 3/2 2 drop in the game right now just felt like it brought the deck to another level. And so the pre-Cobb Vanth version, I was running probably for the first few weeks of set 6 practice, and I was like, this is good, this is better than Galactics, but it's not great. The Cobb Vanth version, I think, was the best deck of the format for me.
Yeah, that's awesome. Free Nemec. Freedom is a pure idea. All right, let's talk a little bit about the sideboard.
Yeah.
Saving some of these comments for this part of the chat because you do have a legal authority in the main, And then two
Yeah.
more here. So, like, what are you looking at for legal authority? Like, when's that the play?
Yeah, legal authority, we just found was consistently shining in a couple of different matchups. It was consistently shining in space aggro because if you could stall their first couple of turns, get to your leader flip, well, the best answer to the leader flip is oftentimes some sort of outmaneuver or bamboozle. That's fine. Now we can't attack with Anakin that turn. We need another way to interact with the space arena. And so just throwing legal authorities have the dual purpose of slurping up really whatever unit you wanted, because at that point Anakin's going to have 7, 8, 9 power, and two, then increasing Anakin's health so that it's unlikely to die in response to whatever the opponent can throw at it. So that's sort of use case one was against more aggressive decks. It's a way to both power up your own side while also changing the damage math on their side. And then the other use case was for higher end space decks, in particular Boba Datavault. I played a couple of those during the tournament, and then Piet Red, which are really trying to slam pretty large ships. But in particular, some ships like Ruthless Raider, really powerful, doesn't have a lot of power to go with it. And so a two-cost card like Legal Authority that boosts your own health, which makes it harder for things like Overwhelming Barrage or Boba Flip to clear, and then slurping up something that costs us, as little as 6, but sometimes you can even get things like a Devastator. Really gave us the edge in those matchups. Piet was a really hard matchup through the whole tournament, but the Piet games I was able to win was oftentimes off the back of a General's Blade on Anakin. That gives it 3 additional health, bringing it up to 10. Turns out it still dies to an Overwhelming Barrage from a Devastator, followed by a Legal Authority to
Mm-hmm.
squeak through to that 12 health, meaning it no longer dies to any of the removal that they have. Craving Power, Overwhelming Barrage, Turbo Laser Salvo. It's really only a planetary bombardment from hand with a Devastator on the board, directing all 12 of that indirect damage to Anakin that can clear it. And so the combined, like, larger Voltron is good for a leader, plus the stop whatever aggression you're doing means that it can really serve two purposes at just a little two cost card meant that it really overperformed for us the whole weekend.
Did you ever think about the new heroic only one that actually captures off of your HP because of how low power is and how high? Like you mentioned this earlier, and I think I meant to try and jump in at some point, but it was like
Yeah.
Anakin's benefiting from all these stat buffs that you talked about, like the power creep of HP. And so
Yeah.
I think it's Moral Authority being the card that would
Yeah.
let
Yeah.
you like capture because you have things that, that are sitting there with 5 HP, 7 HP.
Yeah. I think the theory is powerful. I think the theory means that it's worth testing. We never actively tested with it pre-Beatle, and part of the reason is that there's just a huge difference between 3 and 2. 2 is a lot easier, and there's already a huge difference between 2 and 1, but 2 is easier to sort of slip into a turn. You have a couple extra resources. You've played a 4-drop, but you're on 6, or you've played 2 2-drops, and now you have 2 left over. 3 felt like was the break point for flexibility for us because when something costs 3 or more, now you're designing your turn around it.
Mm-hmm.
And so we wanted legal authority because it could slip in the cracks, right? And sort of be the extra little oomph. We didn't want to say, I'm going to design this turn around moral authority and then figure out what else I can play. That being said, potentially that card breaks the format, potentially it breaks the mirror.
Sure.
Like, if you are listening to Mike and you like it, go out and try it and let us know. I'm open to that possibility. But for us, it just wasn't quite good enough in theory to make the cut.
Yeah, cost is always, the end all be all. I mean, I love that you guys had 3 constables main deck, right? Like, I probably never would have put 3 disabling fang fighters in a main deck, but like when it costs 2, that's a whole different ball game. I think that card is like such
Well,
an important change to what red decks can do.
and that was a change going back to the change I just mentioned. I was at 2 constables before, but then the second I had 3 Cobb Vanths, my Cobb Vanth could now get me a Nemic or upgrade removal. And so that went up to 3. I sat down against your teammate Chrono in the finals of the 3v3, and he looked at my deck list, and I had those 3 constables main, and I had 2 disabling Fang Fighters in the side, and he said, what are you doing? 5 upgrade removal, and you'd better believe that man never played a lightsaber our entire match. Potentially because he didn't draw them, but potentially because he knew that almost certainly I had access to upgrade removal for it.
Yeah, and when you get to the point of tournaments where um, we can see each other's deck lists. That is that's why control players will sometimes, like, even though they don't think they need a super laser blast, they'll still have a super laser blast in the
Yep.
deck because, like,
Yep.
you just got to keep them honest. I
Yep.
think the first thing I did when I made a copy of your deck to test was take this Cinta and put the second one in the main deck
Sure.
as
Sure.
something that I thought just really, really powerful with Anakin, especially when you think about using the life as a resource. So I guess, like, was there something you weren't seeing in Cinta that you thought maybe you would have previously that caused you not to play two main? Because I was honestly pretty surprised to see the sudden ferocity main, because it's just not a card that
Yeah.
I love, but I know I'm lower on it than most people.
Yeah. I started this build when I was practicing. I started with 3 Cinta
Right.
in the main and no sudden ferocity. And what I found was my playstyle didn't really want to use all 6 of my resources to flip my leader and play a Cinta. And that was for 2 reasons. The first reason is I think that there's better things I can do with my 6 resources. If I can get a General's Blade on Anakin, now I can play 8 resources worth of things, and that includes the Blade plus a Smuggled Cassian, that includes the Blade plus an Amidala, that includes the Blade plus a Podamarin, right? That felt more powerful to me than getting in a single swing from my leader. And then the second reason was less to do with the value of the card itself and more to do with action economy. There are times when I actually don't like action economy. I am passing all of the time with this deck. I am self-pinging as a way to soft pass, but not let my opponent claim initiative. And when you flip the Cinta, you are actually forced to take another action. I think you're required to, but you're not going to flip a Cinta if you're not going to attack immediately. And all of a sudden, I have an exhausted 6 cost unit. I've probably attacked with my leader, so that's exhausted. I've spent all of my resources. My opponent now gets to dictate the tempo for the rest of that turn, and oftentimes for the rest of the game. And so, unless the Cinta plus the Anakin attack can put my opponent in check immediately to force a claim, I felt like I more often ended up on the back foot. That being said, the strategy that I think really shined for Pasquale at the tournament that he then taught me was against more aggressive decks. Cinta was at her best because you could end up either in that check position more frequently or you could just end the game on the spot. And so, in hindsight, right, maybe 2 in the main board is right, maybe 1 and 1 is the right split, but she really shines the most in those aggro matchups. Outside of that, I didn't really want her. And so finding the right balance moving forward will probably come down to how aggressive is the meta, what are the most likely matchups, etc. But I learned a lot even through the tournament about what matchups she shines in versus what matchups she's still dead weight.
Yeah, and action economy goes both ways. I think, like, the what you described is like taking more actions, passing. That's its own form of action economy. And
Yeah.
there are
Yeah.
obviously decks and strategies that take advantage of either. The way I look at it is that and this goes back to what we already spoke about with the boat constrictor versus attacking, is that you don't just you give up your action economy, or like your tempo control, to put these giant threats on the board. Like, you've already gotten a giant threat in Anakin, you put
Yeah.
another 5/5 out. That's sort of like a judgment call of, okay, if I play a 5/5 here and I do 9 to them, are they ever coming back from this? Like, are they dead
Right.
even if they can kill one of these things? So
Yeah.
obviously it just goes. It depends on the board state.
Yeah.
But I like having it, and I like having it not only for the plot aspect, but just as something you can, still works when you play her from your hand. So that can be
Yeah.
really beneficial too. But I think it just comes down to, what's on the table in front of us. Other than the Cham, which to fill out to get the full 3 against things that are going to ramp
Yeah.
against you, like blue green control. You've got Eager Escort Fighters, which are great against Falcons, great against other space decks, and then Battlefield Marine Echo Based Defender. Are these for ground aggro decks, something like a Sabine?
Echo-based Defender is pretty much exclusively for Han 1 green because if they resupply, you're not going to be able to hold their Han flip hostage with a 4 drop.
Yeah, you
So
need
we
another four
felt like we
four
wanted a
power.
4 power 3 drop. I had sided them out for the invitational individual portion of the tournament, and then would have killed to have them any of my 3 games in top 8 against my teammate Philippe on Han1 Green, who drew like the gods and had resupply every single game. So the 4-3 for 3 really probably could have shined there. And then Battlefield Marines is just because I'm risk averse. The most commonly cited out card is that Jedi Starfighter, because if you're not playing a space deck, you don't want it at all. And that brings the total number of 2-drops in the main board down by 3, which in a Data Vault deck is not insignificant. It really reduces the chances that you're going to have a strong 2-drop in your opening hand. I really don't like starting with Outer Rim Constables as my turn 1 play. And so I said, what is the best 2-drop that wasn't quite good enough to make the main board? Turns out that's the 3-3 for 2 that's been around since set 1. I said, if I'm going to be taking out 3 Jedi Starfighters, it feels like a nice compliment to be able to at least bring in 2 ground-based 2-drops to make sure I'm going to hit that first turn play.
Great. Love it. All right, Grumpy. I really appreciate you coming on. Please check out all of McClunky Gaming. They stream all. What are you streaming next? I think like they might be streaming. I don't know. Have these not been announced? There's definitely some PQs that they'll be streaming.
Yep.
One on the 6th in New Jersey. They're streaming Hex & Co. on the 14th of February, which I'll be at. It's a limited one. Look for them to potentially be streaming otherwise. I mentioned that the link for the video discussion that they've done will be in the description. What else can you plug right now, Grumpy?
Just, I would be remiss if I didn't shout out my teammate Pasquale. You can see on the screen it's called the Grump Squale Special. Really, the two of us went back and forth with some help from our other teammates to refine this deck for Beatle, and his confidence in my deck helped me get confidence in my own deck, and was just really thrilled to see that both of us were able to take it to top finishes along with our teammate Tyler.
Teamwork, making the dream work. Love it. All right, well, I appreciate you coming on. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.